All right, welcome to our lesson on adding and subtracting decimals. First, we're going to talk about how to add decimals, how to subtract decimals, and then solving problems involving adding and subtracting decimals. Okay. All right, so first and foremost, we need to know our vocabulary. So first, we have addend. An addend is any number used to make a sum or a total. So in this case, if I have 5 plus 3 plus 2, 5, 3, and 2 would be my addends. Again, make sure you pause and write these down and write down your example before you move on to the next one. So now I have sum. The sum is actually the result when two or more numbers are added, or the answer that we get when we add numbers together. A lot of times students like to say that sum means add. It doesn't mean add, but it does tell you that you should add. All right, because here, so let's look at the example. If you tell me that sum means add, then sum actually means this right here. But it doesn't. It tells you that you should add so that way you can get your sum over here. All right, the subtrahend. The subtrahend is the number that is to be subtracted. It's the second number in a subtraction problem. All right, so in this case, we have, there we go. Oops. We have 8 minus 3 equals 5. Right? And then in this case, your subtrahend is the 3. That's what's being taken away. The minuend, so the minuend is the number from which another number is to be subtracted. It's the first number in a subtraction problem. Okay, it's the number that's being taken away from. Right, so in this case, we have 8 minus 3 equals 5, with 8 being the minuend. It's what's being subtracted. The difference. The difference then is the answer to the subtraction problem, or the result you get when you subtract. Again, difference doesn't mean subtraction, but it tells us that we should subtract. All right, so what's really important when we talk about addition and subtraction with any types of numbers? Place value. Place value is incredibly important because if we don't line up our place values, we're going to get an incorrect answer. So, for example, I cannot take 100 plus 58 and line it up by the first digits because 1 and 5 are not both hundreds. 5 is worth 10, and 5 is in the tens place and worth 50. 1 is in the hundreds place and worth 100. I have to line up my ones, my tens, and my hundreds, and then I can go ahead and I can add. The same thing is true for my place values when it comes to decimals. So to help us out, the first thing we want to make sure that we're practicing and continuing to work on is reading our decimals correctly. When you read decimals, you take the digit and whatever place it ends in, and you read that place value. So for example, this problem would be 1 and 8 tenths, because 8 is in the tenths place. The decimal is always read as the word and. It's not point. A point is a space, or is a geometry term. Okay, it's a place on a plane. Okay, and means we're talking about a decimal. So here we have 0 and 2. It ends in the tenths place, so it's 0 and 2 tenths. Here we have 21 and 7 hundredths. Notice I didn't read the 0. I ignored the 0 and just said the number 7 and ended it with hundredths. Now with this one, what I would like us to do is I'd like you to change it to 16 and 52 with the 0 in front of it. So when you read this, it will be 16 and 52, so we're ignoring that 0. 16 and 52, but now it ends 3 places after the decimal, so it's thousandths. The next thing I would like you to do, I'd like you to take these 4 numbers that are listed here, and I would like you to please write them, take them from word form and put them into numerical form. When you come back, we'll check your work. So here you should have gotten 4 and 12 thousandths. Notice we have the 0 here because the thousandths place is 3 places after the decimal. So that's where our last digit has to go. 2 is the last digit in 12, so the 2 has to end in the thousandths place. Here we have 13 and 9 hundredths. Hundredths is 2 spaces after the decimal, so the 9 goes here, and then we fill in our spaces with zeros. Here I have 0 and tenths is the first place, so there's 7. And then 11 and 16 hundredths. So 16 has 2 digits. The 6 needs to go here, the 1 goes here, and now we have our numbers written correctly. All right, so the reason that this is important is because when we add and subtract with decimals, if we don't line up our place values correctly, we're going to come up with an incorrect answer. Meaning it could be the difference of $10 and $100. Now, I don't know about you, but if my employer makes a mistake and gives me $10 instead of $100, I'm going to be really upset. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to line up my decimals. Because if I line up my decimals, that also allows me to line up my place values. Okay, if I make sure to line up my decimals nice and neat, then I know that my place values will be lined up correctly as well. A big mistake students make is they try to line up the last digit. 5 cannot line up with 3, 7, and 7 because 5 is in the hundredths place. 7, 7, and 3 are all in the tenths place. Now, we have all these blank spaces, so what do? We can fill all those blank spaces in with zeros. Okay, so now it makes it easier for me to go ahead and add. And that would actually be my next step. I would add or subtract whatever the problem asks me to do. In this case, it's asking me to add, so I would go ahead and add. All right, so when I add, I get 38 and 15 hundredths. And then I bring that decimal straight down. Right. Sometimes when I add, I like to put the decimal in as I go. So if I was adding and I got 5, and then I got the 1, and I went and carried the 2, I would put my decimal right away so I don't forget that it belongs there between the 8 and the 3. Because if I put it in the wrong spot, now all of a sudden it becomes 3 and 815 thousandths. That's a big difference between 3 and 38. All right, so let's go on to some problems and try together. So like we said before, the first thing that we have to do is we have to line up our decimals. So for the first one, actually what I'd like you to do for all of them is I want you to line up your decimals first and then come back and we'll work through the subtraction and addition. So here you should have had 1 and 8 tenths, and the 8 should have been lined up with the 2. Here you should have had the 21 and the 16 lined up because the decimal goes after the 21. Okay, and then I would add 2 zeros here. Here I would line up the 4 and the 0. And then I would add a decimal and a 0 after my 4. And then here I would line up my 13 and 9 thousandths. I would line up my 13 and my 11. Line up the 9 and the 0, and then I would add 1 more 0. All right, so now we go ahead and we add and subtract as normal. So here I have 8 plus 2 is 10, carry the 1. Like I said, I put my decimal in right away. 1 plus 1 is 2. You should have gotten an answer of 2. All right, so now what you can do is if you'd like to try these on your own and come back and check your answers, you're more than welcome to. If you'd like to work through a couple more problems with me before you do it on your own, that's okay as well. So here I'm going to subtract. I can't do 0 minus 7, so I borrow from the 4. It becomes a 3. My 0 becomes 10. 10 minus 7 is 3. Bring my decimal straight down. 3 minus 0 is 3. My answer here is 3 3/10. This might be a good point to try these next two problems on your own to see if you are doing them correctly, because after this you're going to get problems to try on your own, and I'm not going to be giving you the answers. All right, so here I add. I have 0 plus 2 is 2. 0 plus 5 is 5. Put in my decimal. 1 plus 6 is 7. 2 plus 1 is 3. So my answer here is 37. Sorry about that. 37 52/100. Here, if I subtract, 9 minus 0 is 9. 0 minus 0 is 0. I can't do 0 minus 9, so I have to borrow from the 3, and it becomes a 2. And my 0 becomes a 10. 10 minus 9 gives you 1. Bring my decimal straight down. 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So my answer here is 1 and 109 thousandths.
Mommy.
All right, so for the last part, what I would like you to do is I would like you to try these problems on your own. I believe that I changed this one, 1 8/10 plus 2/10. I believe I actually changed that in your notes though. Oh, no, it doesn't look like I did. So actually, let's change that 1 8/10 plus 2/10. Let's actually change that to 0 and 25 thousandths plus 1 and 800ths. All right. As always, if you have any questions, please be sure to write them down or email me so we can go over them in class.